Closing is definitely an attitude. This process of getting people to commit and take action starts with the attitude you bring to the table. Nothing is more frustrating than working hard to cultivate the hidden arts of selling, only to come up short when it's time for people to make the commitment. You may need a signature, a handshake, or just a click and a credit card. However it takes place, everyone needs to close. But it doesn't begin with technique, it starts with who you are and the mindset that you bring. Imagine what would change if you could improve your closing percentage by only 10%. Visualize what that will mean to you. Let's suppose you do direct sales of some sort. For the sake of illustration, let's say you get in front of 1,000 people each year and you close 50% of the time. If you could improve that close percentage to 60%, that's 100 more sales. But it will increase your income by more than that, won't it? Because your expenses will remain exactly the same. You're already doing the work. So only now you'll be getting more sales. So based on what we've covered in earlier vaults, you have to know this. Good closing comes from good selling, and good selling comes from good people. So the first question to ask yourself is, am I good people? If you struggle to close, part of the problem may be that people either don't like you or don't trust you. But that doesn't have to be the case. You can change that. If you need to revisit Vault 2 and make changes, be sure to do so. You'll need to develop what Zig called a closing instinct, a sixth sense you develop over time so that you become essentially an assistant buyer. You learn to come alongside the buyers and help them solve problems. It all begins with an assumptive attitude. Henry Ford famously said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. The attitude you choose will directly affect the outcome of your future. It will shape your actions, often in subtle ways that neither you nor the prospects can consciously identify. They will detect your lack of confidence and act accordingly. You have to assume the person is going to buy. After all, if your idea, product, or service really is great and what they need to solve the problem, why wouldn't they buy? Unfortunately, many salespeople sabotage their success because they don't take an assumptive, confident attitude that says, in many subtle ways, of course you want to buy, right? Start by assuming the person wants to buy, and he or she probably will. That's called the assumptive close, by the way, and it's foundational to closing success. To share more about having the right attitude and a few other closes, let's open the video vault once again for exclusive Zig teaching and a few more closes you can use.
The second key I'd like to share with you is what I call the key of the assumptive attitude. We need to zero in on that because much of what selling really is all about has to do with our attitude. I'll never forget the day in my neighborhood 3 years ago when I was out doing my jogging. It was that afternoon, and I was 99% through with my jog. And as I circled the block one last time to come by the house, I noticed a young man talking to the redhead there in the front door of our home. And they were so intent in their conversation that I figured this must be pretty serious. So I decided to abort my run at that particular point, and I walked over. The young man stuck his hand out and he said, "Mr. Ziglar, I'm Tom Brakeman. And I was just doing a little work here in the neighborhood. I'm trying to find some pool owners who would like to reduce the cost of their chemicals by at least 50% and cut down on their work in keeping their pool clean to the degree that they only have to invest about 10 minutes to have the most beautiful pool in the neighborhood." I'm just wondering, Mr. Ziglar, if I have just described you. Man, what you gonna say? Now, what you gonna say? You got to say that that young man's got a powerful opening there. And if I'm going to be honest, I got to admit I'm interested in cutting my cost. I'm interested in reducing my work. So I grinned. I love salespeople anyhow. And I said, well, Tom, you've hit the jackpot, man. That's exactly what I'm looking for. He said, well, what we're doing is we're cleaning pools in the neighborhood absolutely free of charge. We're demonstrating a magnificent new robot. It's a creepy crawly. It's just been invented and perfected and put on the market. An engineer who got tired of all the trouble of cleaning his pools went to work on it, came up with it, and it's absolutely fabulous. He said, we will simply put it in your pool and you'll see the most amazing sight. I said, well, I sure don't like the one I got, so let's have a peek. We made the appointment. He came back. We went out to the swimming pool and he unpacked a brand new creepy crawly. Now, the assumption is obvious, isn't it? He's going to leave that one in the pool. He starts out with that particular thing. He showed me exactly how to install it. He said, now, here's all you do with your creepy. And every time, and he started talking about creepy like it was a person, you know. Creepy this and creepy that, and he'd really personalize it. You put your creepy here, and you do this with your creepy, and you watch creepy work. I mean, absolutely fabulous what he was doing. And he kept emphasizing the point, there's only one moving part. And as old creepy went to work, I was impressed. I'll tell you, did a good job. And after he'd been in the pool about 15 minutes with Tom telling me all of the little things to go along with it, he reached over and he got his talking pad. As you'll hear me and have heard me say many, many times, every professional salesperson needs a talking pad so that we can see what is being written down. And he got his talking pad out and he said, now, Mr. Ziegler, one of the beautiful things about creepy is this. We are going to have a design of your swimming pool in our service department. So I want to draw the design exactly with all of the details filled in. And the reason that's so important, as he was sketching the outline, the reason that is so important is that if you ever have any difficulty, if creep is not cleaning a certain area of the pool, all you got to do is get on the telephone, and with your design, you can say, well, in the left-hand corner right there at the bottom of the arrow, we have an arrow-shaped swimming pool. He said, you tell us exactly where it is, and we will know exactly what to do. And in 98% of the cases, you won't even have to have a service call. He said, now I've got it with these dimensions, and does this look like an accurate picture of your pool? Notice how he's getting me involved in the whole thing. I said, yeah, Tom, you're a pretty good artist. That's exactly the way the pool looks. Yeah, the dimensions are exactly right. He said, what do you think about the job creep is doing? You notice where everywhere he goes, it's clean, and well, you can see the difference, can't you, Mr. Ziegler? He never said the rest of it was dirty. He just said, you can see the difference. I said, yes, doing a good job. Then he assumed again. He said, now, Mr. Ziegler, obviously, this is a brand new creepy crawly. I just took it out of the box. You saw it. But since it has been working a few minutes now, if you would prefer, I will get another one out of another box and put it in. Which would you prefer? He's giving me an alternative choice. And I said, well, Tom, shucks, this one's brand new and I know it works. I don't know that that new one out of the box would. I said, this one's fine. Without another word, along with his talking pad was his order pad. And he said, now you can handle this either with a check or on credit card. Which would you prefer? I said, well, the Red Hill will just give you a check for it. I'd prefer it that way. It was that simple. Textbook example. I had a need. He had a product. He was a professional salesman who believed in what he was selling. He demonstrated effectively. He led me through all of the steps. And I'm here to tell you that when you've got a good person selling a good product, it is almost impossible to resist if you have the need, the desire, and the money to purchase.
Okay, now that you have the secret, closing is an attitude. It's time to take action. Over time, you can develop what Zig called the closing instinct. Bringing attitude to the closing table makes people see the need to commit. If you haven't already, take out your guidebook and complete your exercises and record your key takeaway for this secret so you can start enjoying your sales success now.
Zig Ziglar had an important acronym he often used to talk about the most important thing in closing a sale. AFTO. AAFTO. That stands for Always Ask for the Order. Many years ago, the Detroit newspapers carried a feature story about an enormous insurance policy purchased by Henry Ford. When the story broke, a close friend of Mr. Ford was upset because he was in the insurance business, but Ford hadn't bought the policy from him. When he asked why Mr. Ford had bought the policy somewhere else, the answer was enlightening. "You didn't ask me." How about that? Making the ask doesn't have to be painful for you or the other person. In fact, it shouldn't be. If you've applied the core secret, remember, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. If you've worked on being the right kind of person, selling the right kind of product or service at a fair price with the right intentions, you're in a win-win situation. That means closing the sale is a positive and pleasant experience for everyone. Zig often quoted stunning research that 63% of all sales interviews ended with the salesperson not specifically asking for a commitment. That's amazing. Think about that. But it could happen to any of us, even Zig himself. Early in his career, he sold cookware with in-home demonstrations because he didn't have infomercials to work with yet. Well, one time, he managed to schedule a presentation with several couples. He did all the cooking, sold them on the benefits, he painted the story they couldn't resist. When he was done, several ladies were eager to buy. They even asked for the paperwork to lock in the order, and Zig turned them down. Can you believe that? He said, "I have to leave right away because I have to go do another presentation across town." He actually walked out without making the ask and without closing the deal. So if you've ever made this mistake, don't feel too bad because even the great Zig Ziglar fell short here. But he learned from his mistakes, and so can you if you persist in making the ask. Persistence is key. Now, a study from a professor at Notre Dame found that of those who did make the ask, 46% asked once and then quit. 24% asked for the order twice before giving up. 14% asked a third time, 12% hung in there for 4 attempts before calling it quits. And now I want you to think about it. That's a total of 96% who quit after 4 closing attempts. And yet, the same research showed that a full 60% of all sales are made after the 5th closing attempt. So let's think about this. 96% of the people in the study were not asking the necessary 5 times. That means the remaining 4% of salespeople were actually getting 60% of the sales. This means you must make the ask with persistence to begin to 100x your sales success. Because in a digital world, that means you need even more than 5 interactions before most people will purchase. 10 interactions is a good minimum in the digital space, but even then, some people need more in our noisy world. That interaction may be through video or email or retargeting ads, or maybe it's Facebook. However you do it, don't be afraid to make the ask and persist in gaining exposure. We're overwhelmed every day with digital input these days, so persistence pays off. While there are literally hundreds of ways to ask for the order, I encourage you to focus on only 1 or 2 at a time. Keep it simple. It doesn't matter if you know hundreds of closes if you don't know them well enough to use at a moment's notice in the right situation. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go to school on other people's experience. For example, here's a simple close from Zig that you can use when you think you're close to getting a sale but meet resistance and want to learn more. It's called the probability close. Ask the following questions to get the information you need to close. And remember, always use the person's name when you know it. Question number 1 to ask: On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 meaning you're ready to place your order, where would you stand right now? Notice that you didn't mention that a 1 means they are not interested. You don't want that idea anywhere near the conversation. And you don't want to ask, where do you fall on the scale? You don't want to suggest falling for anything. Wait patiently for the response, and when it comes, follow up with question 2. If you are at whatever number they give you right now, what would it take to move you to a 10? By the way, if you're consistently getting numbers from the first question that are less than 7, focus on improving the first part of your selling process. The point is to have a collection of closes you know well that you can turn to when you need to make the ask. So let's watch as Zig unpacks the importance of closing and making the ask in this montage of several powerful sessions.
Many years ago, or so the story goes, a fox and a rabbit were having a cool one in the local pub. And the fox was doing a considerable amount of talking. He was even bragging. He said, I've got so many ways to get away from the hounds. If any of them should come, he said, I could either scoot up in the attic real quick, or I could hop out of here and go down the creek and lose them in the water, or I could, for that matter, double track and backtrack several times. He said, I could lose them a dozen different ways, or go up a tree. There's no way they'd ever get me. And the rabbit said, well, I'm afraid I can't do all of those things. If the hounds should come, all I could do is just run like a scared rabbit. And about that time, the baying of the hounds were heard reasonably close by. And the fox said, now, what should I do? Do I go up in the attic, or do I run out here and get in the stream and confuse them that way? Or should I get out there and backtrack a few times, or climb up a tree? And while he was meditating on the subject, the hounds came and ate him. Of course, the rabbit didn't know all of those things, and the minute he heard the hounds, he just ran like a scared rabbit. Now, what am I saying with that? I'm saying that it is better to know 1 or 2 or 3 good closes and use them professionally than to know 50 closes and not use any of them. But don't you take too much comfort in what I just said. You see, the professional, the real professional, will learn a number of closes so well that they become an innate, subliminal, instinctive part of his repertoire, so that he can use them at the time they're needed. You see, closing is an attitude, and I want to begin by saying that believers are closers. Now, what do I mean by that? Several years ago, I spoke for one of the major life insurance companies out on the West Coast. It was their national convention. They had their top people from all over the country along with their wives. There were about 2,000 of them. And I was having breakfast with the president, and we got to talking. He explained to me that he could take any 100 of his salespeople, and provided they had been selling for at least 1 year, he could, without checking a single record as far as their sales were concerned, tell you within 5 percentage points of what the entire group would produce for the year. He said, Zig, all I'd have to do is look at the amount of life insurance they covered or carried on their own life, and then I could predict within 5 points of what they were going to sell, because you see, the depth of their belief in the product will determine their success in the sale of the product. If you're selling Ford automobiles, you ought to be driving a Ford. If you're selling Chevys, you ought to be driving a Chevy. Now, what I'm saying is that when you believe in your product, you will be using that product of yours. Now, I don't necessarily believe that if you sell 747s, you got to buy one. But I do believe, and I'm certain you understand what I'm saying, that within reason, your belief ought to include yourself and your family. The professional closer builds a closing consciousness, just as an athlete, a football player, has a scoring consciousness, particularly when they get down close to the end zone. In the NFL, the last 2 minutes of the first half and the last 2 minutes of the game, they will score 30% of their total scores because they have drilled and planned. They have gotten that instinct up and the game plan is there, and so they score much more. A lot of times I've heard a team say or a coach say, we had them on the ropes, but we just didn't put them away. A lot of times we get within sight of the sale, and then we just don't ask for the order. We don't close. Another incident, I often make the statement that a lot of people don't get the order because they don't ask for it. And Randy was sharing with me that this couple had been in to almost completely refurnish their home. They had been married a number of years. The kids were now grown to the degree that they wouldn't destroy the furniture any longer. And so the order was significant that they had chosen this item here in several different rooms. And the bill, when they added it up, was substantial. And when Randy presented the total there, the lady just said, "Ooh, that is a lot of money. We'll go home and talk about this." Randy acted as if he had not heard a word that she said. He looked at the husband and said, "Well, let me ask you this question. When you get this, are you going to want to haul it home yourself, or will you want me to deliver it?" And the man turned to his wife and said, "Well, what do you think?" Now remember, 10 seconds earlier, she had said, "We'll go home and think about it." But when the husband said, "What do you think?" she vehemently answered, "Shucks, no. He charges money to deliver that stuff. We'll just take it home ourselves." Chances are excellent that you've noticed something that virtually all professionals have in common. Every one of them are tastefully and conservatively dressed. The reason is very simple. Countless, and I do mean countless, psychological studies reveal that the appearance of the counselor, and that is what a professional salesperson is, has a direct bearing on whether or not the advice given is going to be followed. The second thing about professionals, whether they are doctors, lawyers, ministers, accountants, tax consultants, guidance counselors, architects, psychiatrists, or salespeople have in common is they ask a lot of questions. The reason is fairly obvious. The professional must identify your problem, your need, or desire. They got to find out what you want and what you need before they can offer the solution. They also know that if they ask you the right question, you will often come up with the solution. That way it's your idea, so when it's your idea, your chances of enthusiastically following through are dramatically increased. For the professional salesperson, the advantages are obvious, because it bears out the concept that you can have everything in life you want. In this case, more sales, if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. In this case, a solution to the problem. Incidentally, the professional also directs the interview so that the prospect or person being counseled asks questions so that he, the expert, can give advice which is relevant to the prospect's needs and concerns. That's really what it's all about. In a nutshell, selling isn't just telling, it's asking. Now, I'm obviously not talking about the police interrogator or the prosecuting attorney approach, where they put you on the griddle. I'm talking about the counselor consultant, the helpful friend approach.
Now that you know the secret, you have to make the ask. It's time to take action. Zig said you have to always ask for the order. Don't go through the whole closing process and fail to ask for commitment. If you haven't already, open up your guidebook and complete your exercises and record your key takeaway for this secret so you can start enjoying your sales success now.
Does anyone ever balk at the price of your product or service? Of course they do. Unless you're selling it for far less than it's worth, people will raise objections to the price. They might compare what you sell with something they saw advertised elsewhere. They might imply your prices are too high based on their own life experiences. Be careful not to take price objections personally. It can be disheartening for sure when you believe that what you are selling is worth more than what your prospect does. But that just means you haven't educated them or demonstrated that the value that you have exceeds the price. Let's watch this extended session as Zig Ziglar reveals a few closes and helps us understand that it's all about how we frame the investment decision.
Now, one of the things that a lot of times a prospect will say to you is, well, your product costs too much. A simple question a lot of times will be helpful. Mr. Prospect, wouldn't you agree that it's hard to pay too much for something you really want? Now, it's an amazing fact, but if you're selling a low-ticket item, a lot of times that really sets them to thinking, and they often will say, well, you know, I never thought about it that way, and I really do like it. Now, if you're selling an expensive item, all that will do is get their mind to function and thinking in the right direction, and a lot of times that's the first step towards the close. A lot of times they will still come back, though, and say, well, it costs too much. And then, as we often do, we respond with a question. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Prospect, that it's better to invest more than you planned instead of less than you should? You see, if you invest more than you planned, you're talking about pennies. If you invest less than you should, and it won't do the job, then you've wasted it all. Let me get you ladies to answer a couple of questions and see if we can establish what I mean. How many of you have got some cosmetics at home that are in the drawer that have been there for several months that you're not using, and you definitely know you're never going to use them? Can I see your hands, please? Okay. Now, you're not going to throw them away because they're still good, and that'd certainly be wasteful just to throw them away. So what you'll do is you'll wait another year or two when they're dried out, have no value at all. Then with a clear conscience, you can throw them away. Now, here's my question, ladies. Wouldn't it have been better to have invested a little more than you had planned instead of a little less than you did? You see, you've lost the whole package now. As it is, if you had invested a little bit more, it would have been pennies. Now, I'm not just talking about the ladies. Guess what old Zig did one day before I lost this weight? I went to a suit sale. Beautiful $350 suit. Now, this was some while back. And they had it on sale for $175. Now, it was not my size, but I was going to lose that weight. Half price on a deal like that, you betcha I bought it. Wore it one miserable time before the moths got to it. Wouldn't it have been better had I gone ahead and paid the regular retail price for it, $175 to wear a suit one time? That's an exorbitant price. Yes, it is better to invest a little more than you had planned instead of a little less than you should. One way you're talking about pennies, the other way you're talking about real dollars. The prospect might say, well, it still costs too much. Well, Mr. Prospect, let me ask you this. Are you talking about price or cost? Now, a lot of times the prospect is confused on that, and most of the time they'll come back and say, well, what do you mean am I talking about price or cost? Well, let me share with you an example. Now, please remember that when you see me go into the board, that would be the cue for you in your sales situation to have your talking pad out so that you can use it. I share this example with you because it's out of my own life. It happened to me. It's legitimate. It's real. But it's most important for you to understand that you're going to have to take this example and make it applicable to your own situation. For example, when my son was 6 years old, we went down to get him a bicycle. Now, this was 16 years ago, so things have changed since then. But we went to the Swin bicycle shop, and the price of the bicycle was $64.95. Now, you know, at that time, $65 for a bicycle for a 6-year-old, he's just going to tear it up anyhow. It's foolish. So we went down to the economy bicycle shop, and we found a really neat little bicycle for just $34.95. That price was considerably less. We bought this one. Now, a couple of months later, when we went down to get the new handlebars, fortunately, the bicycle was still in warranty. It didn't cost us anything. A month or two later, though, we went back to get some more new handlebars, and this time we had to dig up $4.50 more. About 6 weeks later, the sprocket apparatus completely came unzipped. I mean, the whole bit. And by the time they got through with that, it was $15 and change. About a month later, the bearings in the front wheel came unzipped. And we went down again, and this time they said 3, 4, 5, 6. I've forgotten what it is because I threw in the towel. I said, no way. You see, at that point, we had invested $54.45 in that little bicycle. Now, my son actually rode that bicycle, not counting the downtime, about 6 months. So the cost of that bicycle was $9 per month. Then we went down and bought the Schwinn bicycle. Now, my son actively rode that Schwinn bicycle for about 5 years. He played riding it an additional 5 years. By that I mean he made a dirt bike out of it, and he and a couple of his buddies, big old boys, much too big for it, but they had a ball on that little bicycle, he did, for 10 years. The only additional expenses involved were for a couple of tires, which had nothing to do with the quality of the bicycle. In 10 years, when you put your pencil to it, it means that this bicycle cost us $6.50 per year for its cost. Now, the price of this bicycle was $34.95 initially. The cost of this bicycle was $9 a month. The price of this bicycle was $64.95. The cost was $6.50 a year. Then you look at your prospect and you simply say, well, now, Mr. Prospects, you know, price is a one-time thing. Cost is a lifetime thing as far as their product is concerned. Now, a lot of people can beat us on price, but nobody can beat us on cost. Obviously, you want to make certain that statement is true. Now, because of that fact, I know you're most concerned with cost, aren't you? Then it's simply a matter of working out the details. When would you like to start saving this money? Shall we put this on this program or this plan?
After watching Zig reveal how to handle price objections, you're probably already jotting down ideas about how to apply the price or cost clause to your efforts. But let's take a few minutes to talk with Kevin Harrington about how he has dealt with price objections on the way to over $5 billion in sales. So Kevin, has anyone ever objected to your prices?
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time, actually.
Okay.
I mean, you know, not every single day, but I mean, we could talk about a lot of different products. I mean, I had a product called the Dual Saw, and it had two blades that counter-rotated. So this is a hand saw. One blade would go like this, and the other blade came back the other way. But it would cut through steel tubes like a hot knife through butter. Whereas a regular saw with one blade, it would kick back and get dangerous if you tried to go through a big piece of steel. Like it would go through tile, it would go through, you know, big blocks of wood. And so this was a little pricey. I mean, it was $179, but other saws were more expensive, and others were a little cheaper maybe, but $149 to, you know, to $200. So we were kind of in the middle. But what we had to do was show the value of the product, right? And one of the beauties of being in the business I'm in, the as seen in TV infomercial business, but now in digital you can do this. It's very visual. We can show, oh, you can spend $149 on this one, but it won't cut what
Right.
what the dual saw does, right? So you're now showing value, you're showing benefits, you're showing features
Okay.
that aren't in the other products. So so this is how you make ultimately the sale. And I'll give you an example of another one you may have. Have you ever heard of the product called the Vitamix?
Oh, yes,
It's a
absolutely.
big, fancy
Yeah,
blender,
for sure.
right? So, and I know Zig Ziglar sold a lot of cookware.
He did.
Well, that wasn't $199 cookware. That was, $1,000, $2,000 worth of
lot.
cookware, right? You think he ever got a price objection?
Probably once or twice.
Once or twice, right? Yeah, a day maybe, right? So Zig was one of the, he had an art to presenting a set of cookware because it was it was cookware for a lifetime, right? And the Vitamix, I'll tell you this, I bought blender after blender, and I'm in the business, for $100, $200. But when I saw the Vitamix, first of all, it's a 2 horsepower motor, all right? Now, I found out the blenders I was buying were about a half a horsepower.
Oh.
So now you want to crush ice, you want to do this, you want to do that. No, they don't work like that, right? They're good at blending, a little protein shake. But if you want to really make something powerful, you can make soup, you can make ice cream with the Vitamix. Okay, it's the 2 horsepower motor that makes this thing so powerful, right? So people now it sells for $3.99, $4.99, $5.99. They're not cheap, and you can kind of get your flavor of whatever price point you want in there. But some with more features and benefits as you go. But the bottom line is this was a product that did things that these other ones couldn't even come close to. So and now I can tell you this: if I looked at the last 3 blenders that I bought prior to the Vitamix, the cost of those was double what I ended up paying for the Vitamix.
Sure.
I've had the Vitamix for 15 years now. And those other ones went a year,
Right.
done. So what is the lifetime cost of a Vitamix that I spent $400 for?
Right.
How much is that over 15 years? Do the math. It's pretty cheap per year.
Sure.
$30 a year, give or take, something like that. Whereas these other blenders were costing me $150 a year because they would cost $150 and last for a year.
Right.
So they were 10 times more expensive because they didn't last and they didn't have the performance. So price, it's all about showing value, performance, and lifetime value, and that's important. So over my time, I can give you the names of dozens and dozens of products that I've shown have much greater value. In fact, I know there's, just to name another one, have you ever heard of Cutco knives?
I have.
I have a whole set of them that we
Yeah.
bought, and they were quite expensive, over $1,000, maybe $1,500 or something for a set, but they're guaranteed for life.
For life.
And they'll replace them, and my wife loves them, and there's peace of mind. The other day, I was using a knife that was at somebody else's place, and the handle broke, and I almost sliced my finger in the process. Knives can be dangerous, okay? So
Clearly.
you want to save a couple dollars and get a little slice on the finger,
Right.
right? So just be careful. I buy quality, I sell quality, and I can always overcome a price objection if I have a good quality product.
And always consider the lifetime cost. Okay, we've revealed the secret to you, framed the investment decision. Now it's time to take action. If people see the quality of what you are selling, they will be able to look past the price tag and see the value you offer. Can you convince potential clients that your idea, product, or service has lasting value for them? If you haven't already, open your guidebook and complete your exercises and record your key takeaway for this secret so you can start enjoying your sales success now.
Here's a proven close you're going to love. It's called the Bad Boy Close. I've used it many times in infomercials. It can be valuable whenever someone feels like they need to make a comparison before purchasing. A lot of times people feel as if they want to avoid even mentioning that there might be alternatives to the product or service they're selling. And sometimes that works well. But when you need to help people make a decision without shopping around, the best way to make it easy for them is to make the comparison for them by shining a light on your competition. Let me explain. When we sell products on television, we obviously aren't able to have a conversation with someone in person. We have to get someone's attention quickly and then anticipate what the objections might be. When our focus group testing reveals that people want to research the market to see how our products stack up to others, we do it for them. For example, when we had the dual saw, we hired an outside expert in tools from a well-known DIY store or home improvement channel and filmed them comparing the tools. We didn't want them to think they had to go to the store first before they could make an informed decision to purchase. We asked what other options are out there. Our expert identified the top 5 alternatives. Then we showed each one of them in our infomercial in action. More specifically, we showed each of them trying and failing to do something our product could do. For example, an alternative to the dual saw was a basic hand saw. We would build up what the basic saw could do, then show what it could not do. Sure, it cuts through wood, but watch as we try to cut through stone, and the blade would break. This other product cuts through thin metal, but watch what happens when it tries to cut a steel rod. Then we would show our bad boy cut right through stone or slice through steel like butter. By showing the limitations of our top competitors, we increase the value of our product in the mind of the customer. If we were selling a juicer product, for example, we might show a blender that can handle some basic kitchen tasks, but not be able to handle other tasks like our bad boy did. By shining a light on the competition, we demonstrated that people would need to buy several different appliances to do all the things our one product could do. And of course, all of those would cost considerably more than our one-stop solution. One thing we did not do was put down the other products. In fact, we built them up in some way, noting what they could do, but then demonstrating how our product was better. This way, people felt empowered to decide for themselves. And besides, many of the viewers may have already purchased some of these comparison products. The last thing we'd want to do is make them feel like they made a mistake in purchasing when asking them to make a purchase. Like Zig would say, we affirmed their ability to make good decisions and then empowered them to make a new decision based on new information. If you need to compare your products or service with others to get people to commit, consider using the Bad Boy Close to get the job done.
The Bad Boy Close. What a good name for this fun close. Let's follow up with the inventor of the infomercial to hear more about how to use this close to multiply sales. Kevin, you use the Bad Boy Close a lot in your infomercials. Yep. So what are some examples of how this close works?
So I love the Bad Boy Close, and have you ever seen, there's a company called Blendtec. They have a blender and they put golf balls in it and show how it, you know, they put goggles on, and it's like they have the Bad Boy product, right? That's, you know, they'll put an iPhone in there and show, oh, it's going to grind up the iPhone, right? So, you know, they're doing kind of the ridiculous, right?
Okay.
And so now, I'll go all the way back to the Ginsu days, back in 1984. What did we do with the knife? We cut through a Coca-Cola can, through a muffler, through a pair of sneakers. What were we doing? Bad boy demonstrations, because we're going to sell you a knife set. Now, it's even not going to be that expensive, but we're going to just make it that you're not going to want to go anywhere else to shop around, because you're going to get 2 Ginsus, a fillet knife, a paring knife, 6 free steak knives. You know, boom, you've just taken all of any kind of objection they might have had away as you do those bad boy demonstrations, because you've got the greatest product. Now, we would do this with, you know, and I mentioned the blender, the Blendtec blender. We would do this with saws. We would do it with mixers, with you know, knives. You know, Bad Boy is taking your product and comparing it against others also. So, you know, beyond just the demos that I did, it's one of the things that people are concerned about is, let's just take a mystical product, $99, right? And we won't put a name on it. Now, when the people are watching an infomercial, we don't have a chance to hear what they're saying.
True.
But if you're in front of them, you may not know what they're thinking or what their objections are, but they're saying, no, I'm not ready to buy.
Right.
So, and maybe it's because they want to check around. They want to go see what's out there. So with the Bad Boy Close, we're going to show you we're going to shine a light on the competition, right? This is something very, very clever because we're not afraid to let them know, here's a competitor, here's a competitor, here's a competitor. Because now, when you're showing the competitor, you're showing why the Bad Boy is better. It has more features, benefits, services,
Right.
whatever it might be, and it's the same price.
Well, let me ask you though, is there risk in shining a light on your competitors?
So in my world, no, because and this is what happens. If I don't shine a light on the competitors, they want to go to the internet and find what are the competitors, and now they're going to be on Amazon, they're going to be on some site, and then now they're not going to be properly informed, because I want to take that Bad Boy Close and show them, all right, we brought the expert in and he found 5 or 6 products in this industry that might be similar in the category that we're talking about with this mystical product. But let's address each one, what each function is, the benefits, the price, the this, the that. So we kind of isolate down to where, well, we just watched this. It doesn't do what our Bad Boy does. This one costs twice as much as the Bad Boy, does similar things, but not even as good. And this one and this one and this one. So when we're shining the light, we're actually moving them off the table to even be possible objections. So what we're doing is giving them less reason to want to go anywhere else.
Okay.
And certainly we don't want them to go to Amazon, because Amazon's going to try to sell them something else, right?
Very true.
So I love shining a light on the competition.
So could this close be used for selling services or just for products?
Oh no, services across the board, absolutely. So I'll give you a great example. So Stanley Steamer cleans carpets. They're an amazing company. They're all over the country. I used them for years in my home. The previous home we had a lot of white carpets, so we had people spilling wines and peanut butter and the kids and whatever. So we had them come out on a regular basis to clean our carpets. And so one day I get a knock at the door, and a guy says he's going to now shine a light on his competition and give me the Bad Boy Close.
Okay.
And I didn't know it at the time, but this is what I came away from it with, because Zig Ziglar loved these kind of techniques, right? So he said, I know you've used Stanley Steamer for many years, and they do a good job. I used to work there. In fact, you may recognize my face because I was the guy that was here. And so I'm like, I thought you looked familiar when you knocked on the door. And he says, now, again, they do a good job, but let me tell you about us. So he shined the light. He's here to sell me carpet cleaning.
Of course.
He shined the light on his previous competitor. It's a competitor, but it's his previous company that he worked with. Now, but let me tell you about me. He says, I use the same systems, the same equipment, and I'm going to do your job for not just the same price, but 10% less, and I will clean all of your tile and grout for free.
Wow.
So now I'm thinking it's the same guy that used to do my carpets for 10% less with the same equipment, and he knows who I am.
And
I
more
know,
service.
And more service. So, he shined the light on the competition, which was his former company that he worked for, but he's now an entrepreneur too. So I really kind of warmed up to the entrepreneurs in his own business. I'm going to give him a start, and I gave him a testimonial, and the rest is history. He went off and became a very profitable little carpet cleaning company, but he also cleaned tile and grout and other parts of the house that Stanley Steamer never did. Now, guess what Stanley Steamer now does? They clean carpets and
I'm sure they do.
They clean tile and grout and similar things, but I don't think they're still matching his price. But the point of it is that when you can shine the light on a competitor and show that they do the same or less, or they're more expensive, and you have more services, more features, more benefits, more power to you, the salesperson, you're going to be successful. So I love it every time.
Okay, Bad Boy Close, service, product, works for both. Now that you understand the secret, shine a light on your competition, it's time to take action. Know what's good about your competitors. Don't try to hide it from potential clients. Show them what the competition has to offer and why what you are offering is better. If you haven't already, pull out your guidebook and complete your exercises and record your key takeaway for this secret so you can start enjoying your sales success now.
Clarity closes. What do I mean by that? The truth is, a lot of people don't buy because they don't fully understand what you're selling. You do, you probably know it well. You've studied your product or your service, you've thought a lot about your idea, but a common mistake is to think that other people have given it the same level of attention. They haven't. They're busy living their own lives. Consequently, you have to try to see what you're selling from their perspective and anticipate the questions they might have. The world is a noisy place. If what you're offering is at all confusing, you'll struggle to get people to commit. Here's Zig Ziglar to walk us through what he calls the disclosure close. It's also been called the basic close or the granddaddy close. It's really about disclosing all the details in a way that positions people not only to understand, but to be sold by the clarity. To make it all clear for us, here's Zig.
When I started my sales career, this one was known as the granddaddy close. That's the way they taught me. Other people call it the basic close. Some call it the order book close. But I met a young sales trainer named Gene Montrose about, 15 years ago up in Portland, Oregon, and he identified this as the disclosure close. And because he identified it in that way, then I believe that's the best way I've ever heard, and so since then I've been using it as that. Now here's the scene. You have demonstrated the product, the goods, or the services. And what you need to do at this point is communicate to that prospect exactly what the terms are. You know, a lot of people don't buy because they don't really understand what the offer is. That sounds strange, but a lot of times they really don't understand whether it's 12 payments at $18 or 18 payments at $12. They don't understand what they get with this particular price breakdown and what they get with the other one. So when I talk about disclosure, I'm really talking about clarification in a lot of ways. And you lead into it, and it works like this. You've got your materials out, your order book is there, and you say, you know, Mr. and Ms. Prospect, Uncle Sam enters our lives in a lot of different ways. Some of them good, and some of them not quite so good. One of the things they did a few years ago we think is excellent. They started requiring that all companies in our business and in this industry reveal to each customer the exact terms of the transaction, all of the, quote, hidden charges. Now, legitimate companies are delighted to do that. Our company decided to take it one step further. Instead of just revealing to our customers all of the terms, they now require us to reveal to every single person we talk with exactly, written out in black and white, what the offer is. Now, you've just laid the stage for writing the order. On the playback of this, you'll really pick up on that. Then you say to your prospect, for example, the serial number, our product number we've been talking about is order number 98, and you just write number 98. Now, the retail value of this is $399.95. Now, it's not major, but I just kind of leave the dollar mark off there on purpose. Now, the shipping and handling on this particular order is $20, and that brings it to $419.95. Uncle Sam, you know, steps into the picture along with the state, and they extract an additional $30, and so the total price is $449.95. Now, many times along about now, the prospect will say to you, and if you'll notice, I have not put their names on this. They'll come in and they will say, now, wait a minute, I didn't say I was going to buy anything. Then you can honestly and legitimately look at the prospect and say, well, of course you didn't. As a matter of fact, Mr. Prospect, I don't believe anybody, you or me either. would ever decide to buy something or not to buy something until they had enough of the information or facts to make the decision. So all I'm doing is giving you the exact offer which our company has. And I've had them so many times. Oh, okay. Then I would say, but let me ask you a question. If, now I use this word extremely hard, if you were to go ahead with this, would it be more convenient to handle it on our $20 each month deposit program, or would you prefer the 60-day cash plan you've just closed there on an alternative choice? And a lot of times they repeat it back, well, if, now I did say if I were to go ahead and get it, I'd have to handle it at the $20 deposit each month. Then we move into another alternative choice, which really involves a minor decision. And when you get into the minor decision, a lot of times a minor decision will carry the major decision. One thing I should mention, Mr. Prospect, is with this particular order, you have a couple of options. You can, for example, choose this electric keyboard to go with it, or it might be that you would prefer this entire set of cassettes to reinforce it. It could be another thing where you could offer a different item like a knife sharpener or a cleaning brush. It could be something like that. It doesn't have to be anything at all other than something of another nature. Like, for example, I neglected to mention, this comes in two-tone brown and solid gray. Which would, and the strong word in this case is would, which would you prefer? Now, if they come, well, you know, I suppose I would like this particular option. When you make that choice, then you simply take them one more step, and the word is in. In getting this, would it make any difference whether the deposits fell on the 1st or the 15th, or would the 25th be better? And then they say, well, you know, it doesn't really matter. Why don't you put them on the 25th? Now you obviously say, this is Mr. and Mrs. J. Johnstone, isn't it? Now, a lot of times people say to me, well, Ziglar, does that kind of stuff work? I say, no. Not all the time. But let me tell you one of the things about this that we really need to understand. And that is that a good close is not going to make anybody buy anything they don't want. But what this particular thing does is this. It clarifies what the offer is. And on so many occasions, I've seen this happen where I covered this, and then 20 minutes later, the prospect, having thought about it as we go through some other things, would say, now how long did you say those payments would be, and when would the first one be? They have gone back to their thought process, and so you still are in the sales ball game. This one reveals the information. Yes, the disclosure clause is a very significant one. What you have done with that is you've established something that includes that alternative choice on two different occasions in there. That's the minor decision we're talking about. Now, Elmer Wheeler, one of the early great sales trainers in our country, used that one so effectively. You might have heard the story. Back during the Depression, he was commissioned by the Walgreens Drug Company to see what he could do about building their counter business at the soda fountain a whole lot more. And in those days, they sold an awful lot of malted milks. Eggs during the Depression were between 10 and 15 cents a dozen. But when they included an egg in a malted milk, they got an extra nickel for it. So you can see what that would have as far as an impact is concerned on that bottom line. So Elmer simply came up with one little thing. When somebody would come in and order a malted milk or a milkshake, the clerks were trained simply to pick up 2 eggs and say, did you want 1 egg or 2? with this milkshake. And they had not thought of one egg at all, or even egg, but thinking that one was less than the two, then they would oftentimes say, oh, one's enough. They sold hundreds of extra cases of eggs every week as a result of that.
We've let you in on the secret. Clarity closes. Now it's time for you to take action. Put yourself in their shoes. If you were the one buying this idea, product, or service, what would you want to know about it? If you haven't already, take out your guidebook. Inside, we've formulated a Clarity Closing Guide especially for you. Complete it and the rest of your exercises. Then record your key takeaway for this secret so you can start enjoying your sales success now.
We've talked a lot about the power of questions in the selling process. Nowhere are they more important than at the close. Let's watch as Zig demonstrates a few closes using questions that you can put to work right away. Then I'll share another question-based close from my own early years in selling that worked 100% of the time.
Now let's look at what I call the three-question close to kind of begin to tie some of these together. Let's assume in this close that you've demonstrated your product. And let's assume that you have demonstrated that it will save money. And so the three questions simply, can you see where using this product or service would save you money? Question number two, are you interested in saving money? And question number three, when do you think you ought to start saving the money? Now, exactly the same question will go with time and work and health. Can you see where this would be good for your health? Are you interested in taking care of your health? If you were ever going to start taking care of your health, when do you think would be the best time to start? That's the immediacy, having them into action right now. I'll give you a specific example of how that works. Don Gerald from Garden Grove, California, represents a very fine, accredited vocational college. A man and his three daughters came in to consider enrolling in the college. The enrollment fee was roughly $16,000. Now, that's a pretty nice little piece of change. But Don had already determined that the man could well afford it, so he knew that price was not the problem. But he knew in order to persuade him to take action, he had to ask him questions that would lead him to the decision table, not run him or force him at the decision table. So he asked him very simply, do you invest in the stock market? The man said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. Then he said, do you consider the funds needed to put your daughters through school an investment or an expenditure? Now, I want you to notice he's tying the head and the heart together. Now, let me emphasize a point. People do make emotional decisions, but if you got some logic behind it, your chances of getting the sale are dramatically higher. Well, the man obviously said, well, I consider it an investment. Then very quietly, Don Gerald said, and how much are your daughters worth as an investment? Now, what I'm encouraging you to do is to think in terms of adapting these and other questions to fit your product, goods, or services. Now, as you look at these, I'm going to go through a series of questions. Some are alternate of choice closes. Some of them are just question closes, and some are the assumptive close. But notice some of these. If this were the only feature this machine had, it would be well worth owning, wouldn't it? Closing. When we install this equipment, would you like for me to demonstrate the major features again? Assuming. Would you like for me to mark this one sold while we check on the most agreeable terms to finance it for you? Now that injects just a slight amount of fear. What you're implying is it might be gone. And I'll say this several times, but the fear of loss is greater than the desire for gain. Don't take anything away from me. That's the reason in stores where they measure out food, we always teach them, put too small an amount on there first so you can add to it. Nobody wants to see things taken away from them. That's selling, all right? Another clause, do you need to consult with anyone else before you place the order? Is the purchase order issued from this department? Would you like to have your own bank finance this, or would you like for us to work out the financial arrangements? Since the item is in short supply, would you be willing to wait for 3 weeks for delivery? Would you want to make a large deposit so the monthly deposits are smaller, or would you prefer a minimum deposit and slightly larger monthly deposits? Would you prefer this in green, or does the red appeal to you most? Again, I challenge you, use your imagination. Think of your products and services, and in your quiet thinking time, think it through. And as you brainstorm, come up with other questions. Shall we ship it by motor freight or air express? Do you want this lot registered in your name or your wife's name? Do you prefer the lot on the golf course, or does the one on the lake appeal to you most? If you saw that it was to your advantage to own this product and the terms we work out are satisfactory, would you have any objection to going ahead today? Can you see the financial advantage to reducing the use of those powerful overhead lights which provide unneeded light in some areas in favor of using point-of-impact lighting during certain times of the day? Do you believe it's wise to invest in solidly constructing equipment which will give you long, trouble-free operation for the lifetime of the product? Now, those are questions that can be asked. And that leads us into what I call, is that fair enough close? You do build that value before you ask for the decision. But let me simply say this. It's okay. It's even wise to let the prospect know in advance, maybe, that you're going to ask for the order. For example, years ago, things were slightly different than what they are today. When I was in the life insurance business, we used to do the fact-finding interview, and then we would go back with a proposal. And I would always have it in a beautiful folder. And when I went back, then I would take the proposal like so, and I would say, I have prepared a proposal for you. Then I would pull out a plain sheet of paper like so. And this is where I'm saying it's okay, it's even wise, particularly if you can go ahead and if you've done a lot of research before you get there and let them know in advance you're going to ask for the order. So I'd pull out this sheet of paper and I'd say, now, Mr. and Ms. Prospect, as you can see, I got a plain sheet of paper. There's obviously nothing there to explain. There's nothing there that you would not understand because there's nothing there. Here's a promise I'm going to make you. I'm going to promise you that when I finish this proposal to you, that it's going to be just as clear, just as plain as that blank sheet of paper is at this moment. And if it is that clear, and if it is that plain, then I'm going to ask you, if you see it is in your best interest to go ahead, I'm going to ask you this evening or this morning or whatever to make that decision. Is that fair enough?
We're back with Kevin Harrington after that whirlwind of question closes from Zig. Kevin, tell us about the post-close you learned when you were selling safety high chairs.
Okay.
You used a question process to stop cancellations.
I did.
Okay.
I did. Thank you. And Zig loved the questioning process in selling. And I believe that's very powerful because when you use questions, you can really dive deep in getting answers on how to sell them, that they provide you almost in the answers of their questions. But now we've already made the sale,
okay,
and I'm done. So in the old days, when I was selling the safety high chair equipment, it was called Baby Tenda. It was a high chair that the babies were suspended in air, and they used it in hospitals. They couldn't climb out of the chair because they were suspended with their feet dangling. So it couldn't tip because it was very square and low to the ground. So it didn't tip over. They couldn't get out of it. Okay. It was a huge safety issue that it solved.
Okay.
High chairs tipping over and kids falling through and getting tangled up in the cords and things. And so bottom line, it was a great product.
Okay.
I loved the product. It was very expensive though. And so in the early days, it sold for hundreds of dollars, and this in today's level would be the equivalent of $800 to $1,000
Okay.
maybe. So
Okay.
not a cheap product. So I would make the sale, and I was getting back to the office all excited, and then we always gave them a 3-day cancellation period. 30% of the people were canceling, and I was very perplexed because I just felt, and now I was a good salesman because I was closing the sale, but why were 30% of the people unhappy after I
Right.
left and making the 3-day cancellation?
Right.
So, I learned a technique that eliminated 100% of the cancellations.
Wow.
And the beauty of this was, I was selling something at that time for $200. I moved on in other businesses and I was selling $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, and $10,000 products eventually. Now, if 30% of your $10,000 projects are canceling, you're talking
that's
about
big.
big.
Yes.
30% of a $200, I was in high school, I could handle it, but
Right.
I still said, no, I'm going to come up with a way for this not to happen. So I'm walking out the door, just made the sale, and I'm turning around and I say, you know what, I've got to ask you a couple of questions before I leave, because, we kind of wrapped up here at the end a little quick, maybe, got the paperwork signed, thank you for that, and I just want to know, did I leave any questions unanswered for you? Because I just want to make sure, did we really cover all the safety
Right.
of the product? And then I took 10 minutes to resell the product.
Okay.
Because, and now, maybe one of their objections was on price, but I put them on a financing plan. And so now, I just want to make sure that this $8 a month that you're going to pay for the next 2 years, is there any chance that is something you may not be able to afford, or are we pushing you too much, or is the financing okay? And then I would say, because the biggest objection we had, they would call their mother the next day, and the mother would say, I'll give you a high chair for free. What are you spending $200 on one for? So now I'm like, now I really have to ask you this, because I know you're going to talk to your mom, and your mom's probably going to tell you she's got one in somewhere upstairs in the attic or something, maybe your old high chair.
Yeah.
But she didn't have the chance to hear about the safety
Right.
and the value and the benefits of this product. So if there's any chance that you call your mom and she's going to convince you that maybe you shouldn't have made this purchase, if there's any chance that's going to happen, let's stop. In fact, let me give you the check back before I walk out the door.
Wow.
And they said, you know what? My mom's not going to tell me anything. No, I make the decision in this family.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that they talked to their mom the next day, and
sure.
the 30% of the people that were going to cancel, you know what those buyers told their mom? No, Mom, you weren't here
Right.
to see all of the safety. And by the way, it's not just a high chair. It converts into a desk, and it converts into a swing. It had 10 functions when it was all said and done. So we showed that there was $2,000 in value on something you could buy for $200, because it grew with the baby all through the baby's life, okay?
Right.
And so now I'm saying, and your mom's not going to know all those benefits. You're just going to hear, she's going to hear high chair, right? So now, you know what they do with the check? No, you take that check back. We've made our mind up. And so there's no chance that you're going to call and say, that this isn't for you. Boom, they were locked. And to that day, after learning that technique, I never, ever, ever had anybody cancel, and I was getting 30% until then. So it's called the post-close, and it gives you a chance to listen to, sell again, summarize all the benefits, make sure that they're locked in and they really don't have any questions, but you also psychologically handled the objections that they were going to get from people not in the room. So this is a way to handle that, because too often I didn't get a chance to talk to that mother who was telling them don't spend $200 on a high chair. So it was one of the most valuable techniques that I ever developed and learned and perfected, and I'm sharing it today with all of those folks out there right now that are part of our Zig Ziglar platform. And it's just exciting to be able to share these kind of things. And these are the kinds of things that we said Zig spent over 40 years of his life developing and perfecting and reading and developing closes, and that is what we're making available to all the folks that are out there today. And you know, myself on a much smaller level, developed a few of my own. So this is it's a really great combination of some of the greatest sales closing techniques, post-closing techniques, and I'm just excited that we're able to share these with all of our listeners out there today.
Now that the secret has been revealed to you, use questions to close. It's time to take action. Don't be afraid to ask the right questions of your buyers. When they respond, it gives them ownership of the answer. If you haven't already, grab your guidebook and complete your exercises and record your key takeaway for this secret so you can start enjoying your sales success now.
Here are a few bonus closes from Zig to equip you with the tools you need to get people to commit and take action. Watch and learn from the master.
I sold heavy-duty stainless steel cookware, and it carried a premium price for a very justifiable reason. And a lot of times the prospect would say, well, yeah, your product is too much. And I'd say, well, give me a figure. How much too much? And they'd say, well, $200 too much. Now, I would always write the $200 down. And then let me give you this little bit of data. I had a policeman take his .45 and shoot my little 8-inch frying pan from a distance of 12 feet, and had a documented statement notarized saying that he had done that, and you could just barely see the dent in that little pan. And so I had shown that to the prospects in the process of the demonstration, and I said, let me ask you, you say $200 too much. How long do you think this set of cookware is going to last you? And invariably they say, well, I think it'll last forever. Then I would say, it certainly would last you at least 20 years, wouldn't it? And invariably they say, yeah, I don't think you'd have any trouble with that. Well, if you invest $200 too much, over a 20-year stretch, what that amounts to is about $10 a year. And if you break that into pennies, it means really that for just 3 cents a day, you can go ahead and have the finest equipment that you can get anywhere at any price. Now, if the prospect still objects or still says, well, it's too high, then I would ask him this. I would say, now, let me ask you this question. Do you ever eat out? And invariably, they would say, oh, yeah, we frequently go out to dinner. Then I would simply say to them, well, let me ask you, do you tip the waitress? Invariably, they say, our waiter. They say, oh, yeah, we always tip. Well, this was a number of years ago, and so I would use a lower price. I would say, well, now, how much do you generally tip? And they would say, well, at least $1. Then I would say, well, now, let me tell you what you're given $1 for. That is to have the food brought from the kitchen and put on the table. You brought the silverware and the china out. They served you water and coffee, but they served. Now, you give her $1 for doing that, or him $1 for doing that. Your wife went to the store. She bought the food. She brought it home. She carefully prepared it. She cooked the meal. She brought it to the table and served the meal. Then she's got to take it up and wash the dishes. Now, remember, this was many years ago before a lot of the ladies were working as they're doing today, and the husband didn't give them much help at all in that kitchen. Most of them still don't give them very much help. But then I would simply say, if you would tip that served person $1 for bringing the food from the kitchen to the table, don't you think your wife deserves at least 3 cents for doing all of those other things? I got to tell you, we got some pretty exciting results as a result of using that particular close. A number of years ago, I was traveling through St. Louis, Missouri. I was changing planes, had a little extra time, looked down at my shoes, realized I needed a shoe shine. Walked into the shine stand. Young man escorted me to my seat. He made the change for his previous customer. I had a chance to look at the prices of the shoe shine. 75 cents, this was about 12 years ago, 75 cents was the regular shine, $1 was the wax shine, and $2 was the spit shine. Well, I figured I'd get the regular shine for 75 cents, tip the guy a quarter, and I'd be on my way. He came to me, and incidentally, I called this the shame close. He came to me, and then he said, "Which one?" I said, "Regular." Now, you're talking about voice inflection. The young man backed up and said, "Regular." Well, I knew right then I was in for an unusual shoe shine, but I wasn't about to let that guy get the best of me. So I said, "Yeah, you guys do such a marvelous job here. I know it's going to be fabulous, and I'll be on my way." Well, the guy didn't say a thing, didn't even grunt. He just started putting the saddle soap on my shoes, and he started cleaning them. And as he did, he said, "Man, these are really nice shoes." He said, "What kind are they?" And I said, "Well, they're Ballas." He said, "Boy," he said, "they're nice." He said, "I bet they're comfortable, aren't they?" I said, "They ought to be." He said, "Cost a lot of money." I said, "Do they ever cost a lot of money?" And he went on cleaning the shoes, and then he reached up and he felt the pant leg. And he said, "Man," he said, "that is really a nice piece of cloth." And I said, "Well, it ought to be too." He said, "What kind is it?" And I said, "Well, it's a Hickey Freeman." He said, "Man, those suckers cost a lot of money." I said, "Yeah, I know they do, but this one's got some special cloth in it, makes it even more expensive. But I've already been wearing this suit about 5 years, and you still can't see any problem with it." Well, he said, "Man," he said, "that's nice." And then he started the shining process, and he was just a shining away, and he was a popping, and when they're popping, that's not shining. I shine shoes in the Navy. I know when you're shining shoes. That's a sales talk. He's trying to attract the crowd from outside. So he was just a popping away, and all of a sudden he backed away, and he looked me right in the eye, and he said, "This seemed like a shame. Man will spend over $100 on a pair of shoes. Spend several $100s to get a nice suit of clothes. And all he's trying to do is look nice. Then he won't spend another $1 to get the best shine in the whole world." I said, "Spit on him, man. Spit on him." Well, now, folks, when you get a 75-cent shine, a 2-bit tip, that's fine. But when you got a $2 shine, nobody with class gives a 2-bit tip. So I gave him a $3, and as I walked out, I was really picking them up and putting them down. I was feeling pretty good, I looked up at the clock, and as I did, it clicked straight up and down 10 o'clock. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because when I sat down, I noticed it was exactly 3 minutes until 10. I was in his chair 3 minutes. I gave him $3. Now, you don't have to be a Phi Beta Kappa from MIT to figure that one out. That is $60 an hour. Did you realize that's what we were paying our psychiatrists back then? Of course, this guy does some good. But, you might say, "But Zig, he doesn't shine 20 pair of shoes an hour all day long." Okay, but you figure, let's cut that half in two. Instead of 60, he makes 30. Cut that half in two. He doesn't make 30, he makes 15. And you take $15 an hour and cut that half in two, and I know he does more than. You know what that adds up to? It adds up to right at $20,000 a year. Shining shoes. And I got something to tell you, friends. If that dude ain't making at least 30, ain't a dog in Georgia. I mean, he is shining a lot of shoes. But now let me point out 2 very sound things about him. His name is Johnny. I asked him his last name. I knew Johnny because it had his name on his name tag there. He said, "I'm not going to tell you. If I tell you both names, you'll forget them both. If you'll always remember Johnny, though." He was a professional. He's the only shoeologist I've ever seen. Now, the reason I know he was a shoeologist, he had it right there on his name tag, Johnny, shoeologist. But let me point out a couple of things. He was a superb workman. He delivered everything he sold. That's important. Number 2, he was a professional salesperson, and those 2 things merit it. But what I'm really saying is, if a gentleman in a job like that can make that kind of money, Look at what we in the profession who have products and goods and services that extend to us infinitely greater opportunities, look what we can do. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, I was back in the St. Louis airport. I walked in this time. There's no other shine guy around, no other customer. I'm the only one. Now, by then, they've changed the prices and structure just a little bit. It simply says, best shine, $2. I sat down. He said, what kind? Well, I didn't want to go through that routine again. So I said, just give me your best. Well, as he was shining, I was bragging on him. You know, I discovered a long time ago that behavior which is recognized and rewarded is repeated. And so I wanted the best possible shine. So we had quite a little conversation. As a matter of fact, he got carried away and he just kept shining, kept shining, kept shining. And finally I said, Johnny, I got to go. He said, okay. And he finished it up. As I stepped down, he said, I noticed you hung up an overnight bag when you sat down. I said, yeah. He said, you're spending the night in St. Louis? I said, yeah. He said, I was just wondering if you had another pair of shoes in your bag. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. He said, it'd really be a shame to have the best looking shine in St. Louis tonight and then just look like one of the gang tomorrow. He said, won't take me but a moment. I call that the extra clothes. Now, a lot of times as salespeople, we overlook the fact that we have other goods and products and services. We skim the surface, and leave more money on the table, more needs on the table that need to be met than we are actually reaching. Don't misunderstand. I'm not suggesting you try to sell everybody everything you've got every time you make that call on them. But they're buying, if you're selling products that they're buying from someone else, think of the time and effort you can save them if you can become more of a service person to them, selling them more of the things they're buying already anyhow. It is a service. You really can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want.
We've already covered a lot of closes in this vault, the Closers Collection, but this is the finale. 5 powerful closes you can put to work right now. Let's watch as Zig shows us the way.
We moved to Dallas back in 1968, and I was extraordinarily busy, didn't have time to go house hunting. The redhead decided that she was going to have to do it. Well, we discussed price at some length. We arrived at a price that I honestly thought was at least what I thought was more than fair, more than enough. But after we arrived at the price and it was all signed, sealed, and delivered, she said, honey, suppose I find the dream home. The home that absolutely is the most beautiful place on earth, ideal for us. How much more can we go? Well, we talked and talked and talked, and we finally decided we would go an additional $20,000. Now, in the 1990s, you might think, boy, that guy is the last of the big spenders. But let me tell you something. In 1968, you could get quality construction for $10 or $12 a square foot. When I talk about another $20,000, I'm talking about a lot of money. Today, you can buy a neat little carport for that $20,000. But in those days, that was a lot of money. Well, the redhead goes house hunting. She comes back all excited, and she starts telling me all about this wonderful home, great big lot, 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, and honey, it is so beautiful, I'll tell you, and the neighborhood is absolutely great. I said, well, how much is it? Oh, she said, honey, you got to see it. Said it absolutely is astonishing. Every bedroom's got a walk-in closet. And the living room, the master bedroom rather, is so big we're going to have to get us a riding vacuum cleaner. I'm telling you, that is some more place. I said, sweetheart, how much is the house? And she finally told me. And it was $18,000 more than the maximum we had discussed, which was already $20,000 more than we had any business spending. And I said, sweetheart, we can't buy a house like that. She said, well, I know it.
But she said, we haven't seen anything in Dallas, and we need a benchmark. I have asked the builder to come by when you finish teaching the class tonight so that we can go out and you can look at it. I said, well, I'll look. That's as far as it's going to go, though. She said, don't worry about it. Well, when we stepped out of the car, I knew I was in trouble. Beautiful home. Exactly like I wanted. One that I would have designed myself had I been an architect. Then I did something to that redhead and to that builder that your prospects have been doing to you all of your life and will do to you as long as you're in selling. Though I had great interest, I pretended that I had zero interest. Now, why would I do that? Very simple. I was scared to death that she and that builder were going to gang up on me and talk me into doing something I already wanted to do, was scared I was going to do, and knew I had no business doing. Now, I call this the snooker close in reverse, because your best prospects many times will act as if they had no interest whatever. Don't let them snooker you out of position. Sometimes your very best prospects will act that way, thinking that they don't want to look or listen because they're not ready to buy right now, and why waste your time? We walked in that house, and I'm not accusing the redhead of having taken drama lessons, but as we walked in, there was a beautiful chandelier. She was a couple of steps in front of me. She looked up and around all at the same time. Message delivered, message received. We got into the den, and she said, honey, just look how big it is. We can put our big oversized sofa over here. This is where the television is going to be. This is your fireplace. Here's where you can put all of your books. And all of a sudden, everything gets to be mine. Your fireplace, your television, your sofa, your books. And this is good selling. It's putting the prospect in there. Give them ownership in their own mind. She gave me a fast tour, and she was so excited about everything. She showed me where we could build that arrow-shaped swimming pool out there. She showed me how we go through the garage there, and here's room for the cars, all of our tools, and here's an 11 by 11 space for you to build that little office in it. And then when she finally got through, there she stood, all 61 inches of her, grinning from ear to ear. She said, honey, what do you think? Well, what you going to say? I said, sweetheart, it is beautiful. But I said, you know we can't get a house like this. She said, I know that, honey. But I just wanted you to see something really nice. She said, now we'll go look at something cheap. Now, come on, you don't think that redhead would try to shame me into doing something, would you? Well, we went on home, went back to the motel where we were staying. That's the reason we had to get us that house. And next morning I got up, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth, and she walked in. She said, honey, how long are we going to live in Dallas? I remember I was 100 years. She said, how many? I pulled a toothbrush out of my mouth. I said, 100 years. She said, no, I mean really. I said, I mean really too. I love Dallas. I hate to move, and we're going to live right here in Dallas. She said, you think we're going to be here 30 years? I said, well, of course we're going to be here 30 years. She said, well, honey, 30 years, $18,000. She said, she forgot about the $20,000. She forgot about the original price. She forgot about the insurance and the interest and the taxes and all of those other things, or did she? She said $18,000. Oh, you're talking there. Now, honey, $18,000 for 30 years, how much is that a year? And I said, well, sweetheart, as you well know, that'd be $600 a year. She said, how much is that a month? I said, well, that just figures out to be $50 a month. She said, how much is that a day? I said, sweetheart, now your arithmetic's just as good as mine. Perfectly good and well. That comes to about $1.68 a day. But I said, why do you ask all of these questions? She said, well, honey, before I answer that, can I ask you one more question? I said, sure. She said, the question is this. Would you give another $1.68 a day to have a happy wife instead of just a wife? I don't think I need to tell you we bought the house. Now, let me point out that close was originated, as far as I can determine, in 1902. Frederick Sheldon used that to show how when you break it down, that the prospect sees that it's affordable. Some people call it the reduction to the ridiculous close. But it's an old close, but it still absolutely does work. When the prospect sees that they can handle that, and you see, the redhead knew, I'm an optimist. I'm the kind of guy that go after a Moby Dick in a rowboat and take the tartar sauce with me. I mean, that's my basic nature. She knew I figured I could get another speaking engagement or make another sale or do something to come up with the extra money. But let's not overlook another critical sales point. She understood that she had to make an $18,000 sale. She'd already sold the others. See, if you're in real estate and your prospect comes in and says, I've got $200,000 I can invest in a home. The home they want comes to $230,000. You're not making a $230,000 sale. You just got to work on the $30,000. That's all you've got to work on. If the prospect can only afford a $485 a month car payment, but what they really want comes to $565, you just have to sell the difference in there. They've already bought the other. When you understand that, the selling gets to be lots easier. Yes, that affordable close is all tied together. Now, I want to point out something also about that, because so many times the customer wants to buy something and we don't have the exact model. When we moved from Columbia, South Carolina, I said to the redhead, now you can pick anything you want in a home. There are 3 things I want. That home's got to have a swimming pool. It's got to have an office, and it's got to have a circular drive. Well, the house did have a lot of things, but there were 3 things it did not have. That's right. Did not have a swimming pool, did not have an office, did not have a circular drive. Did that slow her down? Not in the slightest. She pointed out the marvelous advantage I had. I could design my own pool. I could have that office exactly like I wanted, not like some builder who didn't know you would build for you, and I could design my own circle drive. Now, why did I mention that? A lot of times, what you've got is better than what the prospect wants. Now, if they want it and insist on it, then that's great. You sell them what they want. But you have a responsibility, if you've got something that meets their needs better, to let them know that this kind of thing really is available. In counselor selling, that's what it's all about. The next close, and I want you to understand this, many times people don't know what they want because they don't know what is available. In using your imagination, real estate developers have long known that a raw piece of land frequently will sell better than a developed piece because the people can use their imagination as to what they want to do with it. The next close is what I call the diagram close. This is one that we have found to be extraordinarily effective. A number of years ago, we had to buy a new copier. The little one we had was just inadequate. It was slow. It was doing a lousy job. And we needed, all of a sudden our business exploded, and we needed something, and we needed it now. Well, the copier we were looking at was $10,000. And here is the way the procedure went. How could we justify that kind of an investment? Well, first of all, we did a lot of figuring, and we were paying at that point a lady $5 an hour for working an extra 2 hours a day, or $10 a day, or $50 a week on that slower machine. And that doesn't count the paper that was being wasted and the aggravation and so forth. So when the salesman came calling on us to sell us the copier, then this is the procedure that was followed. First of all, you got to understand, and this is a thing that works in a lot of closes, the fear of loss is greater than the desire for gain. A lot of time when people are procrastinating and bringing up one objection after another, they are simply saying, I have a fear I'm going to lose. reassure me, because my fear of loss is greater than my desire for gain. So this one works like this. Let's assume you sell. How many of you sell products that save money? Can I see your hands? All right. Now, if we go ahead, if we invest the $10,000 in the machine, or, and I projected it right out, or if we don't invest the $10,000, okay? Now, if we invest the $10,000, 1 year later, let me show you something. We've got 2,500 of those dollars back. Now, why do I say that? I say that because $50 a week times 50 weeks means that in 1 year's time, we're getting $2,500 in savings on the machine. Is that crystal clear to everybody? All right. So if I invest the $10,000, a year later, I've got $2,500. 2 years later, I've got $5,000 back. 3 years later, I've got $7,500 back. 4 years later, I've got my $10,000 back, and I also have the machine. Now, if I don't invest, then obviously I've got my $10,000, but 1 year later, I only have $7,500. Is that absolutely clear? Not having it, they lose the $2,500. 2 years later, I've only got $5,000. 3 years later, I've only got $2,500. And 4 years later, I don't have any dollars, and I have no machine. Now, you see, they can see that very clearly. Then I simply, in order to make the close, will say to the prospect, you are not deciding whether you want to invest in the machine or not invest in the machine. That really is not your decision. What you're deciding is simply this. 4 years from now, do I want to have $10,000 and the machine, or do I want to have no money and no machine? That really is the decision. That makes it pretty easier to decide on that one, doesn't it? In other words, that's a close that will work.